Chapter 12. Derek held Andy's hand over the course of the next hour as the three of them reiterated their plan on their way back to Pradicus's home. The area of land upon which they stood began to slow and then incredibly assimilated itself into the shoreline as it drifted alongside it. The three of them stepped onto the shore just before the river waters washed into a series of rapids. They trekked a bit farther over a couple small hills where they stopped upon cresting the second hill. The view overlooked a considerably wide neck of the Eastland River and provided them a glorious scene comprising Pradicus's home and the woodland surroundings reminiscent of lush, enchanted forests described only in fairy tales. Pradicus built his house on an 8, a 60-acre island measuring twice as long as it was wide. The 8 had formed in the center of the river as a result of an enormous ledge protruding out from the river bottom, forcing the current to separate and travel around it. A fairly moderate downgrade led them to the river's bank, where they stood looking onward toward the house. It featured a wraparound wooden porch and stood 2 stories tall and was swathed in ivy. "How are we going to cross?" Derek asked, turning to Andy. "What?" Pradicus, Andy asked, deferring the question. Pradicus tapped his staff 3 times, then once again against a large flat rock extending into the river. A large swell appeared from downstream and hurriedly approached. It disappeared between the island and the rock. The water then began to separate as a leathery walkway rose from under the surface. Pradicus stepped off the rock and onto the new risen walkway, continuing forward toward the house. Derek's slow glance out of the corner of his eyes told Andy she had some explaining to do. "It's a kraken. Pradicus rescued it from Lignor Dre's clutches when it was a baby. He said he brought it back and nursed it to health, and it apparently decided to stay. Now one of its great arms acts as a bridge for him. How did he get across before? He said a line of enormous stones used to act as a bridge of sorts. They must have been hugely tall to be able to sit on the bottom of the river and still stick out above the surface. Lignor Dre destroyed the bridge long before I got here in an attempt to kill Pradicus, but I suppose he could just float on another land piece. Why not just stay on the same land piece all the way down the river?" Derek asked. Andy opened her mouth to answer, but he butted back in with, "Oh yeah, the rapids. Well, we did that once. And surprisingly, the rapids had almost no effect on the little piece of land we stood on. It was a beautiful trip, but a long, long trip. The river winds all the way down there around those hills before coming back up," she said, pointing into the hazy distance. "I did see a pretty interesting-looking cave way out there that I wouldn't mind getting a better look at someday." "Wow, well that thing's arm is gigantic. What's the rest of it look like?" "I don't know. It stays hidden. It plays downstream a lot and gets all the fish it needs because of the river's neck. They come right to him." She carefully stepped off the rock and onto the massive arm, and he followed. Her eyes studied the hide for sure footing. "It talks to Pradicus, you know, the kraken," she said. "I've seen it. It's like it knows what Pradicus is thinking about." Derek, following in her exact footsteps, looked up at the back of her head briefly and tossed her a dismissive smirk. "You're smirking at me, aren't you?" He stammered, caught off his guard. "I knew it," she said perkily. A few hours passed. Andy and Derek shared a moment on the front porch, lounging on a swing handmade by Pradicus's father. "We go to work after breakfast," Pradicus said, poking his head out. "Be prepared." Andy smiled at Pradicus as he returned into the house. "A penny for your thoughts is what he always said to me. You can't afford it," I'd reply, and then of course we'd talk. "Honestly," she said, beginning to think about it. "It's been a few weeks since he's asked me that." She pressed her lips together in a frown. "What is it?" Derek asked, putting his arm around her. "Oh, it's probably nothing. I can't put my finger on it. Something's off." "Hey, you said earlier that you gave up on me like a year ago?" Andy looked back at him sheepishly and bit her lip. "You know what? Don't even go there. How could you have known? Really, I'm just curious. how did you remain so hopeful for my, He moved his hand about in a gesture searching for the right word. Arrival, I guess. She drew her thoughts in for a moment or two. Pradicus. The answer surprised Derek. He looked over his shoulder and then slowly returned his gaze back to Andy. He kept assuring me that you couldn't be far behind. But I could see through his optimism. Yet every month he said he was off to find you, especially the last few months. He seemed surer, almost certain about your coming. That's when all the talk of the Atlas began to surface. In fact, she said, sitting up, that's when things really started changing around here. Seriously, it's like we haven't seen much of Lignaudre or Beerville. Last month, for the first time since I got here, I saw people from the village. I even overheard a couple travelers joking they heard that the Grey Riders must have finally turned on Lignaudre. They said they were finally going to get a look at the great mystical cavern. Speaking of the horsemen, they were thought to be a myth. Then, all of the sudden, out of the blue, they show up. That's like waking up and seeing the boogeyman standing in the corner of your bedroom. Things have certainly begun stirring lately. Wow, Derek. Do you think there could be anything to this prophecy? As contemplation slowly swept over her face, she drew in a deep, controlled breath and slowly scanned the outline of the hills against a tall pink and orange sky. Having nothing to add, Derek simply held his gaze on Andy. A few moments later, he shared her view of the sunset, and the two sat quietly. The river's flow rushed towards them and then split at the Eight's tip in raging sprays like the Titanic carving through the ocean. Birds sang their evening praises and melodies into the unfailing breeze, which Derek noticed was brushing against Andy's face and through her hair. I can't believe how peaceful it is here. You've lived here for 18 months, he asked. It hasn't been all bad, she said, drawing her knees up into her chest. I kind of made this my spot. Derek saw a young woman. He was mesmerized by what she'd become. The now not-so-awkward pounding in his heart returned as he studied her face from the seat beside her. His eyes traced the entirety of her profile, landing on an inscription carved into the wooded armrest beside her. It listed the names of her 4 siblings in lowercase, and below them, in a somewhat fashioned heart, read, Derek. She followed his eyes as they arrived at the etching. Sporting an enlightened look, he glanced back up to her face. Their eyes met, and for a moment, nothing else in the world mattered. He slipped his hand beneath hers. The beginning of an enamored grin peeped from his lips. You're really here, right? Andy asked softly. Derek nodded. I rehearsed this conversation, it seems, 1,000 times from this very spot before She paused and frowned, then covered her lips with her free hand. Before I decided I would never see you again. She closed her eyes, while several tears edged her lashes and fell. She took a moment to gather herself and then continued. If there's one thing I've learned about myself through all this, it's that She paused again, then opened and landed her wet eyes upon his gentle expression. Derek, she said, but was interrupted by Derek's single finger over her lips. Hush, he whispered. He pulled her toward him and wrapped an arm around her. She nestled herself into his shoulder, then released a long, overdue breath of reprieve. He thought of the earlier incident on the haystack in the barn, when her hands fell upon his and the somewhat awkward stirring he experienced. He found himself baffled on the dissimilarity, yet a blissful grin quickly emerged as he openly welcomed the occasion at hand. A mere minute or two had passed since she'd emptied herself with that alleviating sigh when a peaceful slumber fell over her, evidenced by a single, ever-so-hushed, snoring breath. He reached for a pink flowery quilt hanging from a polished oak quilt rack set up beside him, then proceeded to drape it around her. He watched as her face erased any remaining air of tension. Only a word more expressive than perfect could have summed up that single moment in time. If only he knew what shadow loomed down the corridor of his morrow. Derek left Andy on the porch for the alluring aroma of homemade roasted duck. Goodness Pradicus, that has got to be the best thing I've ever smelled in my entire life. So how do you guys cook duck these days? Pradicus smiled, folded up a small cooking cloth, and neatly set it down. Roasted duck, lad. Roasted. It does smell wonderful, does it not? He patted Derek on the shoulder and then proceeded out the screen door, joining Andy on the porch. Derek watched the screen door close. Did they even have screen doors in the 12th century, he asked himself, as the image of Jake sharing future technology with Pradicus emerged. Shrugging it off, his eyes scanned the cottage interior. Its warm decor made him feel considerably welcomed, with various wildflowers positioned on and along the walls and strategically placed cooking utensils hanging throughout. The wood possessed an exquisite lacquered sheen, which fascinated Derek to no end. "This place is incredible," he said, taking the liberty to explore more of the beautiful home. He opened and closed several doors and cupboards, noting the lack of creaking and smoothness of the hinges, and then he made his way to the second floor. He heard Andy's sluggish voice trickling in on the gentle breeze through one of the upstairs windows. 2 rooms and a small den comprised the upper level. Though the doors of the 2 study rooms were open fully, it was the darkness looming around the edges of the nearly closed den's door that caught his attention. While the overall impression was that the door should have been closed, it undoubtedly was not, as it rested ajar slightly. Captivated by curiosity, he gave it a gentle nudge, then a second later a slightly more robust jolt. The door objected with a groan as it drudged across the swollen wood floor. Derek peeked in. Pale rays from the sun's western setting crept along the floor as he proceeded to open the door farther. A sudden cool gust, laced with a trace scent of something he couldn't quite put his finger on, brushed against his face and through his hair, as if escaping past him. The door continued to creak as it unhurriedly opened to its fullest extent. He stepped in. The light entering in from behind him was barely adequate for his eyes to adjust to the stark darkness. A window positioned on the side wall to his left was blanketed with what seemed like a black tar substance. Books upon books and papers unsteadily stacked characterized the tiny room. It took his eyes another moment to adjust, but he soon discovered it was a journaling room. Derek treaded softly as the floor popped and grumbled with every step. On the wall opposite the window, he was able to make out an almost hidden small door without a latch. Furthering himself into the room one small step at a time, he came upon a desk. One book lay open on it. He bent down for a closer look and with a single breath, cleared a thick layer of dust from its pages. His amulet, hanging down freely, took on a dim glow. He turned the journal slightly toward him, trying his best to follow what might as well have been a completely foreign language. A familiar word jumped out, then another. "Oh, okay, I got this. It's Old English." "Wow," he said, then stopped dead when he recognized the word Jake, followed farther down the page by another which sent a twisting knot through his stomach. The word was his own name, Derek. "40 or so minutes later, Andy found him upstairs in one of the study rooms overlooking the landscape from a window. "Hey, where'd you go?" Derek didn't answer. She quietly stood behind him and then rested her chin against his back. Her touch snapped him out of his daze. "Andy, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Did you say something?" "Hey, what's going on?" He had an answer but tucked it away. "I'm so enjoying how beautiful it is here. Couldn't you just imagine living here for the rest of our lives? My goodness, I mean, as long as you like fish, you'd never have to go anywhere. It's perfect here. Where are all these heavenly getaways back in our time?" Andy smiled and then wrapped both her hands around his arm. "I have to admit, it really hasn't been bad. So spill. What is it? You gonna tell me you're thinking about staying now?" He turned and looked at her. They enveloped one another, each in the other's eyes, for a lengthy moment. "What is it?" she asked. "How many times have you been up here, the upstairs, I mean?" "Why?" He shrugged his shoulders. hundreds of times well between the two study rooms. "What about that room?" he said, nudging his head in the den's direction. "Oh no, that door's been locked shut for, I don't know, months, years probably." "Really?" he said, and then paused. "Haven't you ever wondered what was in there?" "I suppose. But it's always been locked. I mean, I don't even think Pradicus has the key. It's not been opened since I've been here." He set his eyes over the landscape once again. "Are you saying you've tried to open it?" "Well, Pradicus has. He's tried everything short of breaking it down." "Is that what he told you?" "Uh-huh. Plus, I've seen him try." "So what's the sudden mystery about that room?" "I was just in it." Shock exploded in her expression. "What? You're so lying to me." "I'm telling you I was just in there. It's a journaling room." "That's not possible. I've tried getting into that room several times myself when he wasn't around. It's sealed shut from the inside." "I'm telling you, Andrea Halley Schaefer, that I was just in that room. I read something I don't think I was privy to." She stood back away from him. "Okay, show me." "Open it." "I'm not sure Pradicus would be happy if he found you in there." She shifted her weight and then shot him a glare. "What are you basing that on?" "Call it a hunch." She turned away in a giggling snort. "You almost had me. I gotta tell you, that was hands down the best yet. Come on, dinner's almost ready. Doesn't it just grab you, the roasted duck? He douses it with spices I've never even heard of. Can you smell them?" She drew in its fragrance in a slow, extended breath. "Oh, it's the best." Pradicus called to the two of them from downstairs. "Sup's on." She smiled. "You so almost had me." She grabbed one of his hands. "Come on," she added in a gleeful tone. "Wait until you taste this. This is the best cooked duck in the world." "Roasted duck," Derek replied. She laughed. "Oh yes, of course, roasted duck." Chapter 13.